What is going on, my fellow Summit Chasers? Welcome back to another Tuesday, another episode of the Founders Focus. And I am very excited about today because I haven't had a guest on the Founders Focus in quite a while now. So Kirill will be our first in the last, how long has it been? It's been about 2-3 months since we've had a guest on this one. So I've been solo for a long time, partially by choice. But I am very excited for not only my voice to be the one that is heard on these Tuesdays. But before I bring him on, let me give you a little bit of a background on him first. I'm not going to give it all away because I want him to tell most of the story. But the reason that I'm excited, one of the many reasons I'm excited to have him on, and the reason that I was so keen on having him on, is and actually kind of goes back to a discussion that we were having on the Summit Success Series, which was on last Thursday with my good friend Ray Trevino, when we talked about the concept of, is failure a necessity needed to find success? And it was really interesting kind of where that conversation went. We talked for probably way too long on the topic because you could tell that both of us were kind of like, I don't think the same thing I thought now that I did in the beginning of this conversation. And then we had to open up a whole other conversation. But it's really interesting is that we don't necessarily think that failure in itself isn't necessarily needed, but the lessons from trying and not succeeding are, if that makes any sense. Because you can't really fail if you get back up on the horse, you take everything that you learned and you go find success somewhere else, doing something else, or in another version of what you were currently doing. So it's a really interesting concept. So it's awesome that we have Kirill on here today because he started 3 other businesses, not including the one that he has right now. He's going to correct me if I'm wrong. I can see him in the backstage. I'm trying to see if he's nodding or shaking his head right now. But I think he started 3 other businesses, and one of which I'm not going to. Well, it actually was in the thumbnail, was a vodka alcoholic beverage company, and then he gets into VR fitting rooms. Like, it's so interesting that, but I feel like part of the story when we first had the conversation, I feel like in order for him to be as successfully as he is now, he almost had to go through some of those things. At least learn the lessons. He didn't have to go through them specifically, but he had to learn the lessons from it. So it's really, really interesting. But he went from vodka to virtual reality fitting rooms. So cool. But I'm very excited to have him on. Really quickly, a couple announcements. We were very excited to announce somebody else that we had on one of the shows. This is on the Summit Chasers podcast. We had Karen Steffen on the show. She is the founder of EarKick. Now, she gave me a little promo code to use for the app EarKick. And it's an AI, almost like an accountability buddy, a mental health support AI platform. It's an app. And I meant to download some of this. She sent some brand materials for it. I meant to download that so I could show everybody too, but I didn't get a chance to do it. But I've used a lot of, and I'm sure there is a lot of others out there and a lot of others that have used AI to try to have conversations with, to bounce off ideas. Obviously, everybody uses it to, write your LinkedIn posts. You know who you are, write your email copy, all these types of things. And you ask it questions like, hey, can you write me this? Hey, I need some advice on this. This has been, since using it, and I was fairly skeptical about it too, because, I'm having a conversation with an AI panda. They made it look like a little panda. It's actually pretty cute. But having a conversation with an AI that defeats the purpose. I know I'm not talking to a person, so therefore I'm not going to take the things that they're saying to heart. I'm not going to conceptualize them. I'm not going to internalize them. However, that is not necessarily the case with EarKick. I don't know what they're doing. I'm not going to pretend to be an AI expert, but the way they have their language model set and the way it learns consistently, and obviously they have some amazing professionals on the back end developing this, but it's not so much I ask it a question, and it has a lot of good business collaborative advice on there as well. But I'll ask it a question, and it doesn't necessarily give me an answer. It asks very intuitive questions back. And it's crazy that AI is starting to do this, and I know that it's getting better and better all the time. But the questions that it was asking me back was such a huge help because it helped me, again, answering questions and getting asked questions in certain types of ways. It helps open different pathways and different kind of conceptions of the issue that you're trying to solve. But it has been so powerful. It's been a really, really cool little tool that I've been using. And I'll always will have a mentor. It'll always be detrimental to have a human mentor, somebody that you can lean on, somebody that can give you advice, somebody that can keep you in check, sort of things. And I will always have that, but you can't call or text them, at 1 o'clock in the morning. And as entrepreneurs, a lot of especially if you're a founder running a business and kind of at startup phase, you get ideas like 2 o'clock in the morning, you're up, you're like, I have nobody to talk to. This actually helps a lot of that with conceptualizing some of those ideas and asking it questions and asking some questions back to you. It allows you to really it helps you think things through in that interim when you can't get to your mentor, get to your coach, or get to your business partner, something like that. So I'm a huge fan of Ear Kick. And this is actually going to be a 3-part podcast. And we talk about her very unconventional ways that she develops resilience. And I'm going to let you guys go watch or go listen to the actual the episode itself in order to kind of get an idea of what it is. So I'm going to put the link in, if I can get the right link here, in the comments. You guys can go check it out. But phenomenal lady, phenomenal business, phenomenal little app. Very excited for that to be shown to more people so they can utilize it, especially if you're business owners and you just feel alone sometimes. You're just there twiddling your thumbs. I have nobody to talk to. I have all these ideas. I need to get these things out of my head so I can go to sleep, so I can be productive tomorrow. It's an amazing tool for that. But I wanted to give her a shout out, and I wanted to show everybody, lead everybody to that podcast, because it's an amazing podcast. Very, very great lady. But to the task at hand, I'm not going to introduce him too much because I want him to introduce himself. But I'm really happy to announce, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, so he's just Kirill to me right now. So I apologize for that right now. But very excited to welcome to the Founders Focus, Kirill. How you doing, my friend?
Hi there. Pleasure to be on the podcast.
Beautiful, my friend. How do you pronounce your last name?
Moisyeyev.
Moisyeyev?
Yes. That works.
Okay, that works. Okay, good.
Yeah.
This is the bare minimum.
I mean, it's an Eastern European last name, so I'm a little bit. I don't mind to anglicize it a little bit. It makes it a bit easier to pronounce that way.
Gotcha. Because that's not how it seems like it's spelled, but that's fine. Anyways, that's not the focus of this. I really appreciate you coming on, though, my friend. So if you could really quickly, briefly, kind of give everybody a little bit of a background on yourself, and I want you to be able to share it a little bit later on, more in depth, what you're currently working on.
Mm-hmm.
But give everybody kind of just a brief overview of kind of your track of the businesses that you've kind of started, ideas that you've had.
Sure thing. So I guess I was one of the ones that were lucky in university to actually figure out what they wanted to do. In my third year university, I took one class, I think, that changed the trajectory of my life, and it had to do with entrepreneurship. And actually, the very first business plan I wrote was an assignment for that class, and that became my very first ever business. And that was a company called Vodka. We invented a vodka-based cooler that was sweetened with stevia and had a little of natural juice in it and fortified with anti-hangover electrolytes. And that was my first startup. And then from there, I got into video, what people these days would call like video AI, where we created a software back in like 2016 that could watch some video footage. We were focusing on the esports industry and could create highlights in real time in an automatic fashion. Then I had a couple of smaller sort of side hustles, but the next sort of like more significant thing was a virtual reality arcade here in Toronto. We also developed some software for management. We were in the process of potentially franchising with a few folks as well. And then last but not least, is what I'm working on now, and definitely what I'm most proud of, is the fitting room. And the fitting room is looking to solve some of fashion industry's biggest problems, such as overproduction, online returns, better consumer shopping experience. And what in essence we allow you to do is to create a really accurate 3D avatar of your body and use that avatar for online apparel shopping. So we have a suite of products ranging from size recommendation, which is currently live, to a 3D virtual try-on system that we're on the verge of launching, and sort of the North Star that we're working towards. It will actually enable you to try on a custom fit garment before it's ever made and actually see what it's going to look like on your avatar to help you with a personal decision.
That's the kind of stuff you saw like Total Recall and like all these other types of movies, but you're doing it, which has very little to do with vodka, unless you that's when you got the idea, is when you were testing out your own product. I don't know. We'll go on that. We'll go on that a little bit later. But let's go back kind of to the beginning, because one of
Mhm.
the premises that we talk a lot with our clients and on these podcasts is don't be married to one like particular idea, one particular product, one particular service, one particular way of doing things. And you obviously haven't been, because those are very like they got a little bit more aligned kind of near the end. They had a little bit more to do with each other at the end. But if you go like along the lines of your career, you're so far, they haven't been, they haven't been, succinct. They haven't been exactly the same. So what made the what was the motivation to shift from the vodka industry, because you said that was your first business idea, vodka, to again looking at more software?
Yeah, so I think like one lesson I learned early on is that you really want to be able to eat your own dog food. You kind of want to be the customer. So when I started Vodka, I was still in university. So I was trying to think of a product that I would consume.
Mhm.
As I kind of graduated from that idea, I really started looking at tech a lot more and learning a lot about more tech and seeing how scalable those solutions were. And again, around that time, I started realizing that once again, if you want to actually become successful at something, you have to become an expert in a field and then use that as a jumping off springboard to try and find the niche within that field that can actually move the needle. So that's
Mhm.
sort of how it progressed. First, I sort of just got into tech with my business partner a little bit. The esports thing was actually his
Mhm.
idea, and that's kind of when I got the first taste of what those type of businesses were like. I was consuming a ton of content around the time, lots of business podcasts, reading a lot, learning a lot
Mhm.
about tech industry in general. But it was exactly when I then tried virtual reality for the first time that I knew that that type of technology was going to be able to change industries. And I
Mhm.
didn't know what I wanted to do within that sphere, but I knew I wanted to do something within a general, XR, MR, AR
Mhm.
sphere. And the reason why I wanted to end up opening up a virtual reality arcade is that it gave me a front row seat. It gave me a front row seat to how this technology is going to actually work, and that eventually gave birth to the fitting room. Well, that was one of the core kind of concepts that understanding how the technology worked helped me
Mhm.
come up with the right idea within the fitting room. Within that gave birth to the fitting
No, and I love that answer. There's a few answers in there that I liked, which because a lot of if you read some of these like business guru books and that kind of stuff, they always
room.
say just find what you're passionate about, or find a problem that you want to solve, or go, ask yourself all these introspective questions and that kind of thing, which is good to do. This is good to do for probably a lot of people, to find out, what are you most passionate about, what kind of skills that you have that you can then leverage, and are they aligned with your passion? All that stuff is great. What was your like your big motivator? What was there a passion, or was it simply because I like what you said from a strategic standpoint, this this sector is more scalable. I'm looking at, market share. I'm looking at market share in determinant to profitability. I'm looking at competitors. I'm looking at this kind of stuff. So what was it for you? Was it more this is strategically a better decision, or was it no, this is more of a passion of mine?
So the first company, Vodka, we definitely had product market fit. We were
Mhm.
blowing up, and the reason why it didn't end up working out is that we eventually got a phone call from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that told us that we were selling healthy drinking, and that we couldn't, add electrolytes to alcohol. We couldn't market it that way, and they were shutting us down. I mean, I think it's up to interpretation how clear the legislation was trying to convey that. Obviously, the government believes we misunderstood and we couldn't do that, and yada yada. But what
Mhm.
I realized is that what this meant is that if you're going to go into a highly regulated industry, that you need to have a big war chest. And if you don't have a big war chest, if you don't have the right team, if you to be able to navigate a lot of these legal requirements, that's not the safest pond to play in.
Yeah.
So that was one of the lessons I took away. It's like, okay, I would rather go into more unregulated industry because then
Mhm.
it's easier to be able to operate in that. It's easier to make mistakes in it if
Mhm.
you have like overlooked something and so forth. And tech, relatively speaking, is a more unregulated industry than, for example, food products. So I said,
Mhm.
okay, it'll be easier to make small mistakes that are correctable going into that vertical. So that probably makes a lot more sense. And then, of course, the secondary part beyond that was I realized that technology is a lot more scalable. You don't have to necessarily create lots of physical products that are, relatively speaking, lower margin. You have often limitless or almost infinite margin when it comes to technology products. So that's sort of piqued my interest after kind
Mhm.
of swimming in the other pool. And I thought that sort of they made the next lateral jump to start learning more about that industry and trying to find a niche within
No, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. What advice would you give yourself if you could transport back time now, knowing what you know now? What advice would you give yourself when you were just starting to, like you said, like you really started to blow up with the vodka company? What advice would you give yourself right now if you went back to that point when you were just kind of you're hitting the base of that hockey stick?
Well, unfortunately, the advice that I would have said is make sure to not do that particular business because it didn't work. The irony is, I think
Yeah.
we could have. So that what the government said was that we could reformulate it to still get the electrolytes out of like natural juices
Hmm.
instead of out of added electrolytes. But when we reformulated at the time, the price point was too high.
Mm-hmm.
In today's market, it would totally work, totally sell with the formulated formula where we were getting what we needed from certain juices
Hmm.
or certain ingredients. But at the time, the price point was too high. So either I would have said, wait to do that idea till later, because then there would have been the price point that made sense for the consumer,
Hmm.
or know earlier on that that's a very difficult industry to go to. And instead, you should have learned coding in university so that you would have understood the tech industry sooner. So
I
that's
mean,
probably advice that I would have given myself is that should have been my degree is computer science instead of
yeah.
what I ended up doing. Yeah.
Well, what's I mean, it's I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020, but it's interesting when I ask individuals that question. Sometimes they try to dig their heels in. Like I'll find a way to make it work. Like I would have done something. I would have reformulated earlier, whatever it is. But you're saying, I mean, and that's an honest answer is I would have got out of it sooner, which
Mhm.
is an answer not a lot of people I think would want to give. There's a lot of ego involved. Like I don't want to admit my idea wasn't right. But what even though the industries weren't very similar, there's
Yeah.
the regulations were a lot different. What did you take away from that experience into and take it into that? Because there's the next was the esports highlight software, right? Yeah. What experience did you take away?
So from the things not to do is I wanted to go in a non-regulated industry like tech. I think we did a lot of things really well on the marketing side. In particular, I think with a physical product, experiential marketing is, I
Mhm,
think, one of the most powerful forms of marketing, like actually putting a product into people's hands.
mhm,
And I think, like, even with the fitting room right now, we're not doing that, but I have ideas of how we can really effectively use experiential marketing to get people more engaged.
mhm,
Um, I think I learned a lot about that. That's that's probably the biggest lesson that I took away that I could apply to other things. But it's
mhm,
also just the general stuff. It's like how do you build even a semblance of a team? How do you sell? How do you build a product? I think no matter what business you do, you pick up little skills that can then be transferable into your next venture or other parts of your life. I
mhm.
mean, we literally formulated vodka in a kitchen, so it's uh, you got to do what you got to do on those early days to make it
Yeah.
work, and that's how we ended up making it work at the time.
No. Yeah, no, and understanding at the beginning, like that grind and being okay with it, like making the vodka in your kitchen and
Yeah,
being okay with that. Like not
yeah, that's where the samples were originally made. So
yeah,
we actually built we jerry rigged a soda stream to be able to
mhm,
become like a way to be able to carbonate beverages.
mhm.
So if you see the soda stream machine, you're supposed to use it in a very particular way, and we found a way to use it not how it was described to be able to
Ah,
to actually pre-fill bottles with carbonation and be able to kind of formulate them and so forth instead of having to buy these $10,000 machines to be able to do
that's
this
too
simple.
funny. Well, that's amazing. How long ago was that? Was that about 10 years ago, you said?
Yeah, 11, I think 12 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
between 10 and
It's
12.
long enough ago, we're not getting in
Yeah.
trouble for it. That's good. That's amazing. That's amazing. There's nothing like the ingenuity of somebody who just wants to make it work and is
Yeah.
willing to do that kind of stuff just to make it work. Incredible. But one thing that I liked what you said though, because it is such a different industry. And this is why like one of the challenges that we run our clients through, and the reason that I put people from the home improvement industry in with people in the software or real estate or whatever it is, I put them together because there is a lot that you can take away that you wouldn't have otherwise even looked at if you weren't exposed to it in these other industries. So it's awesome that you're saying that, from sales and marketing and experiential marketing, you're able to take that away from selling drinks out of your kitchen. So I know eventually it wasn't out of your kitchen. I get that.
Yeah.
But selling vodka and then moving into software, it's great to hear you say that, and then again, that to be validated. So you moved into. Let me ask you this first. That sounds like your esports highlight software. What was it called?
Resports.
Resports. Oh,
Yes,
beautiful.
do like rewind, replay, and then
Yeah,
resports. Yeah.
perfect. I know exactly that the name. I know exactly what it is.
Mhm.
So resports. What's because that's kind of before this whole AI thing blew up, but it sounds very much like you're utilizing some aspects of AI. Is that like, can you explain that a little bit to me? Because I've heard
Yeah.
this before where people are using what sounds like AI 10 years ago. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think at this point, the word AI has become used incorrectly very often.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people these days think AI is just any kind of like algorithmic or um, kind of more deep tech processes that are being used, which
Mm,
technically is not correct. I mean, if you really think about it, AI, what AI means is that it means machine learning. And
mhm,
machine learning is, I don't know, I guess the simplest way to describe it for those that don't understand the ins and outs is like trying to pattern matching almost,
yeah.
where you basically train a computer being like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2. If you see the pixels that look like one and another pixel looks like one, that is two. But
Mhm,
but in essence, that's what you're teaching is you're teaching the computer how to pattern match.
mhm,
What we were doing in particular at the time is like we were following the chat spikes, so
mhm,
using like people and people's reactions, and then we were following things like kind of what's going on screen, sort of like the loudness factor, uh, some of the sort of where the scenes were happening. So it was, I guess, like a type of computer vision where we're analyzing the screen, but
mhm,
it's not technically AI or what actually is supposed to be AI these days. But that's the thing, like the lines are getting so blurred these days, where there's all these softwares that are just using
mhm.
what 5 years ago would not have been called AI, but it performs like AI, so therefore people think that it's AI.
Yeah,
So it's that's sort of the funny part about it. But I mean, the end result. I mean, I think what matters more is the end result, and the end result was we were getting really awesome highlights without the
yeah.
use of humans. So yeah,
I mean, I think that is what people think, like, their definition of AI is get a result without using humans.
yeah.
I think that
Well, in that case, we were doing just that.
yeah, we'll be doing it, and, like, I've talked to somebody who, I mean, they've been doing it that not that specifically, obviously, but similar things for decades.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
it's super interesting. It's super,
yeah,
super interesting. Okay, so you went from resports into now you're getting into the VR
yeah,
space.
yeah.
It was then that was the VR arcade.
Yes,
Got
yeah.
it.
So
So go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yes. I mean, with resports, if you kind of talk about like lessons and takeaways for anybody listening, we definitely accomplished product consumer fit,
Mhm,
but what we failed to do was the proper monetization strategy. We had this really cool software that we could either, try to sell to like the leagues or we try to use ourselves or things like that. And none of those things kind of really lined up. And I think
mhm,
the biggest mistake that we made is that we did not properly analyze our total addressable market.
yeah,
Esports was really on the rise, and everyone was saying, "Oh, it's this massive market." We're like, "Oh, well, if we're going to do something in esports, we're going to be rich." But that's
mhm,
not how it works. I mean, you really have to think about like what slice of the pie within esports we would have been capturing, and that's what we
mhm,
should have done. And we
mhm,
totally misjudged that. We didn't do good bottom up uh, TAM and SAM and SOM calculations, and that's was a huge mistake on our part. And that was a huge lesson that I took away. That whatever that I wanted to do next is I had to properly analyze that market and make sure that I was going after a big enough market that even if we quote unquote failed, we only captured 2% of
mhm.
it, that it was still worthwhile.
Yeah.
So that was a big takeaway. Um, and really understand how you're going to monetize and make sure that it can be profitable and make sure that the market is big
Mhm. Yeah, and that's where a lot of, we hear a lot of people's ideas because we tend to do a lot of introductions, founder startups to like VCs and then pre-seed
enough.
funds and that kind of stuff. Is they have ideas that they're like very similar to yours. They're not in the exact same space, but similar as in like, oh, this is blowing up. We're going to be rich, but not understanding, okay, how is this going to be monetizable? How are we going to create a product that people are willing to pay? And how can we create an infrastructure that creates that continuous cash flow. And it kind of reminds me of well, I can't remember the name. Oh my God, because not StreamYard, but the other one, Zoom. Wow, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
Zoom ran into a kind of a similar issue because a lot of people were using Zoom pre COVID and that kind of stuff, but it wasn't the way that we communicated. It wasn't known as the way that the only way that we run our businesses and that kind of stuff, at least the way it is now. And then during COVID hit, and then everyone was using Zoom. You would have thought, just from looking at a 50,000-foot view, that Zoom is raking it in right now. But they didn't have a very well thought out monetization structure, because you could just use it for free. And like, okay, there's a 45-minute time limit. I'm just going to end it and then open another one, and I'm good. I can just keep using it for free. So they had this huge like spike, like their market capitalization like really spiked, and their shares and stuff, like the price of their shares and stuff went way up. But then they crashed really, really quickly because they didn't have a way to, like, their cash flow wasn't matching the potential. Is that kind of similar to what you were seeing? I know it's not the exact same thing, but similar.
Well, way less awesome than Zoom, but
Different scale.
yeah. I mean, there was, in retrospect, actually, ironically, looking at it now, me and my co-founder at the time were talking about it recently, and that we could have pivoted to a different market, which
Yeah.
we didn't think of at the time, which was Twitch streamers. Twitch streamers were just starting, and
Yeah.
we missed that opportunity. But yeah, there's sometimes opportunities to pivot, but no, I mean, like we made much bigger mistakes than than Zoom would have made in our analysis. I'll tell you that much. But
Mm.
and I think that was another component of it, is that we just thought it was a great idea, but neither of us were crazy passionate about the space. And
Mm.
that's, I guess, maybe another takeaway that I do is, like, you really want to be passionate about the problem that you're solving in
Mm.
the market, because it is going to get hard. And
Mm.
the only way you're going to survive is that because you care about it so goddamn much. Sorry, I hope that's okay that I said that
Swear all you want.
on the air. Okay, that you care so goddamn much that you're going to break through the wall to make it happen.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that passion for that product and or that space. And I think that was another thing, is like, you gotta, if you're working on it, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, like, you gotta love it, right? Because
Mm.
otherwise it's a job. But if you
Yeah.
love it, it doesn't feel like a job, even though you're putting in those hours.
Mm. So to circle back then, so that's where the passion is so important, because would it be fair to say then, if you were that passionate about maybe the product itself or the problem that you were solving or the opportunity that you were creating, that maybe you would have recognized that ability to pivot or the opportunity to
Yeah,
pivot?
I think
Yeah.
so. I think we maybe would have seen that space, and I maybe we would find a different way of monetizing, a different way of, we could have maybe come up. I'm not for sure, but maybe we could have come up with a way
You had a
of,
better chance to.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
But I think, like, we had worked on it for long enough, and it all just felt like a grind, and we weren't
Mm.
finding what we kind of found what we needed, but not quite. I mean, the nice
Mm.
thing was, like, when we shut it down, like, the hundreds of emails that we got of people being like, "What happened to you guys?" That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But it felt validating, but at the same time, ultimately, in a way, failed those customers because we weren't passionate enough about the product.
Mm.
Because if we were, we could have done even a better job.
Were you, did you just shut it down, or did you have the opportunity to sell at all?
Um, we got an acquisition offer later for it, but that didn't quite pan out at the end.
Mm.
So yeah, for now, I mean, we can always technically spin it back up. We have a code base, but
Well,
it's
let me know what introduction I can make.
thank you.
Hey, I mean, I'll have to just put it into the fitting room.
Yeah.
You went from resports
Yeah.
to now we're getting into the virtual reality. So what was that? What was that like? What was that pivot?
Okay, so man, so after we shut down Resports, me and my business at Spare Time, we spent like the next 6 months crazy ideating, maybe even longer, maybe like 9 months. But we'd like go down a rabbit hole for 3 weeks or a month, like try to like validate it. This time we're like, okay, we got to be sure that this idea is bulletproof before we do something else. And we do, 1 day research, 1 week research, 3 weeks research, a month research on some things, and then be like, okay, no, it's not there, and we kind of move on. And then one day I end up trying virtual reality for the first time. So one of my actually business partners in Vodka ended up opening up, if not the first and the second virtual reality arcade in Canada. He's based out of Victoria, BC,
Mhm.
and I tried VR for the first time, and I could not believe what I was witnessing. So, I played video games when I was younger a little bit, but I hadn't, you know, ironically, until the resports, I wasn't like really into
Yeah, I was
video
about to
games
say.
in any way, shape, or form. Which is,
Yeah.
but there I wasn't playing them, but I was like consuming the content. But
Mhm.
yeah, like I wouldn't call myself a huge gamer. But then when I tried virtual reality, I was like, this is not gaming. This transcends that.
Yeah.
And the moment, that eureka moment, was when I was in an 8x8 booth and I had my headset on, and my buddy was another 8x8 booth, I don't know, 20, 30 feet away. And in the virtual world, we high fived. And I could hear him yelling in my headphones, quote
Mhm.
unquote, in front of me. And at the same time, it was so freaking loud that I could hear him 20, 30 feet away. And I'm like, wait,
Mhm.
he's there, but he's here. He's
Mhm.
there, but he's here. And just the way that, you know, the mind fuck of that was like so crazy that
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is actually so convincing, and that means that this can be applied to many, 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 many different industries. And then I was like, okay, I need to become an expert in this so that I can find the next good use case.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what happened. So I opened up Toronto's largest virtual reality arcade. We were open for over 5 years, and I worked in. So it took a while. Also, just if anybody wants to get into retail business, I'm telling you, it's hard. Just got to take like at least 6 months to open. Finding a place is hard.
Mhm.
Getting the lease is hard. Opening it is hard. I'm just telling you, it's hard, and might not be quite worth the squeeze. I mean, we did okay, but it's a lot of work. But
Mhm.
either way, so first it took us a while to open it up, but then I spent the first 6 months automating the business and working in the business because I wanted to see how consumers use this technology, like what
Mhm.
excites them. And out of that, just watching consumers use it, I came up with a ton of different ideas that I tried to validate. Once again, I go on little rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Is this a real thing? Is this a real thing? And nothing was quite clicking. There were all these things that were like almost there, almost there, almost there, but I never like really sunk my teeth in anything until one day I was trying to buy a pair of straight black jeans, and I went to the Eden Center, Toronto's biggest downtown mall, and I'd walk around and find skinny black jeans, super skinny black jeans, tapered black jeans, but not a single pair that was actually black and straight.
Mhm.
And then I left the mall 3.5 hours later without purchasing anything. And I'm like what I believe is a very standard looking dude. And I was like, wow, I could not buy a freaking pair of jeans in 3.5 hours. This is insane. There has to be a way to shop. Too bad that I can't shop online. Actually, trust that my purchase is gonna arrive and actually fit me.
Mhm.
And that's when the wheels kind of like really, really started turning. I'm like, oh, could that VR experience that I've been, consuming for the last 2 years apply here?
That's it's so funny where motivation comes from, or like the light bulbs come from.
Yeah.
Like you didn't go into the mall. Like, were you doing market research for your
No,
future VR? Like
no, no,
you
no.
just identified a problem. But then you later on, and I'm cheating a little bit because we had talked
Yeah.
beforehand. You then later on found a much bigger problem that you could then solve on the business side as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So, okay. So, I mean, ironically, right after I came up with this idea, I started talking to people about it. And the way that I was pitching it was maybe not the best way. I was saying, like, imagine shopping in VR. And everybody was saying, you're crazy.
You're
That is
nuts.
like future. That's future. That's like so many, so many years away. And like maybe I should have like prefaced, okay, we can break this down to smaller problems and solve it
Mhm.
smaller and enlarge it over
Mhm.
over time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't get a lot of love initially, and that discouraged me for a minute. But then I went on a little trip to Southeast Asia, and I stopped in a small town of Vietnam called Hoi An. It's almost
Mhm.
exactly halfway between the two major cities of Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi.
Mhm.
If any of the listeners have never been to Southeast Asia, you must go to this town in Vietnam in particular. It's called Hoi, Hoi space AN. In my opinion, the best food in the entire country. Has all these beautiful canals. It has influence from like Spain, France, Japan, Korea. It was a major port trading city, but it's also really known for its custom fit tailoring. This tiny little town of maybe, I don't know, 200,000 has about 200 custom tailors. They're like door to door to each other. It's insane. So on my last day there, I get caught up with the hype and I walk into one of the stores. They cut some fabric, they take my body measurements, and they asked me to come back. I kid you not, an hour and a half later. I come back to the first store, I put on the shirt, and it fits me like an absolute glove. And this is like the first time in my life where I enjoyed shopping. Usually, I try to run out of the mall because I can't stand being there. But here it was this very relaxing, pleasant shopping experience. I'm like, okay, are you telling me this is what shopping can be like? And that's when the wheels started turning. So this shirt was only maybe I think $30 US. I did not even bargain. And I quickly started doing the math. Okay, if you have shipping duty markup, there's a business opportunity here. All they have to do is take this experience and find a way to put it online. So thanks to my VR experience, I immediately started thinking, can I create a 3D avatar of somebody with just their smartphone, ideally their front camera so they can do it by themselves in the comfort of their own home, and then you can take the measurements, send it to a place like this. And I was thinking, bam, we have a business. And I'm like, I leave the first store and I'm super excited. And all these ideas are in my head. And I walk into the second store, pick up the second shirt, but it does not fit. They remake it, doesn't fit. Remake it again, doesn't fit, and it never fit. And I was like, okay, what just went wrong? The first store, which is the most magical shopping experience of my life, and a second store, which is a complete and utter disaster. And what I realized I had to do with two factors. One factor was definitely an element of human error, where the second pattern maker was probably not as talented. But the bigger thing had to do with the fabrication. The first store, I picked your traditional cotton fabric. It was going to drape a very predictable way. The second store, I picked out the softest fabric that I could find. It would have required a different cut, but the human pattern maker could not account for these fabric differences. So I realized if I actually want to bring this to the masses, I can't just send a place like this measurements. I actually have to find a way to automatically create the pattern. So all that they have to do is cut and sew. And we have to eliminate that human error out of the equation and account for the fabric properties. So that was sort of the second light bulb moment, literally in the next hour. Also, literally on that same day, we walked into another store for my girlfriend at the time. And when we walked in, they gave her a book this thick of magazine cutouts. And at first she was super excited. She's like, oh my God, I can get anything that I want. But then she starts flipping through it and becomes a complete deer in the headlights. And I was like, what's wrong? She's like, I don't know how it's going to fit. And I said, what do you mean it's custom? Of course it's going to fit. She's like, no, it might fit me in the shoulders, but how's it going to fit around my waist, my hips? What is the stylistic intent of the garment? What that made me realize that the word custom fit is actually a little bit of an empty word. And whether something is off the rack, regular sizes, or it's custom, the consumer actually has to see what it looks like on their body to make a confident purchasing decision. So this whole pipeline came together where we enabled the consumer to create a really accurate 3D avatar of themselves with just their smartphone. And then able to use that avatar for online shopping. Now, the original vision and still a North Star vision is to actually enable you to be able to try on a custom fit garment. And when you press the buy button, we produce a production ready pattern that gets sent to the manufacturer. But of course, as I've got into this business and we've been working on this problem for a long time, we decided to break it up into smaller problems as well from there. One of those being a virtual try-on product for existing sizes, and even a size recommendation solution that just recommends the size. So depending on kind of where the brand is, as we call it, a 3D transformation journey, there's a few different products that we can sell to them and be able to help them with some of the industry problems that they're suffering from.
Okay, I need to breathe after that. Okay. So that's an incredible example. And there's one thing that we do in our strategy challenge that we do is we help or we I don't want to say force, but we push you along, business owners, in identifying some challenges and some problems, issues, threats that are within their business and within their product and that kind of stuff, how they're fulfilling, so to speak. And you just I guess in real life, it would have been like what, a 3-hour span. You had these 3 light bulbs going on. Yeah. You just gave great examples on how these challenges, because at that moment you had like an outside perspective, like you had that outside purview. So you weren't in the business, right? So you were able to, I mean, in your head, you were probably already doing the numbers. You were kind of you already had the business in your head because I can tell that's how you work. But for the most part, you were a third-party observer. So you're able to see these problems. Whereas most business owners, they're looking at their product, they're looking at their fulfillment or their service from the first store that you went in's perspective. Oh, custom fit. Oh, if we did this, we could do that. And then we ship it off. Oh, it's not fitting anybody. Why? Okay, we got it wrong. Is it human error? Is it this? Then they're looking in the wrong place. as opposed to really dissecting the true nature of the product, of the thing that you're trying to provide, and find like the true, like you call it like a critical point analysis. Like, what is that problem? And you, like, your second light bulb was, oh, not all fabrics like drape the same or fit the same and all this kind of stuff. And then the other one, the third light bulb is, I don't know, what is the third light bulb?
Well, that whether it's custom or off the rack, the consumer has to really try it on if they're going to have a
Mhm.
good purchasing experience online.
Yeah, because the way it could look on the rack or in somebody else's body, and then they go to your dimensions, because everybody's a little bit different, it could look completely different. So you need to have that true custom to you perspective and outlook. Like, that's so, the fact that you just did that in 3 hours in three different stores, and sometimes, and it's just the way it is, and you might run into it later on, like these problems that we're just so, we're in it. Like, we can't see the forest for the trees, or is it the other way around? I can't remember, trees for the forest, because we're so in it. But that's a really great example of how a lot of times the challenges, they're not obvious, and you have to do these critical point analysis in order to be able to find them. So that's, anyways, I wanted to bring that up. So where did the, what am I trying to say here? So that's on the consumer side of things.
Mhm.
Where are you now, and how, because you identified a real problem that you could solve for like B2B.
Mhm.
When did that light bulb pop off?
So when I came back from that trip, I went into crazy hardcore research mode. So I spent the next 2 months or so, like deep diving into the industry, understanding all the competitors. Well, then I started validating, I guess. So I dived
Yeah.
into all the competitors, like every single thing that I could find, and then I spent about 6 months reading scientific papers. So I tried to understand, okay, what research exists on creating avatars, what research exists on pattern creation, what research exists on rendering. So I read over 200 scientific papers, and I might have not understood the math in all of them, but I was able to understand enough where I actually came up with a different way of creating custom fit patterns. And then
Mhm.
I took that concept to a bunch of different pattern makers, and they validated it, fortunately. So I was on the right track. But that only happened because I literally read every paper I could get my hands on, go back to year 2000, and nobody was doing it the way that I had in my head. I was like confused. I was like, why is no one else doing it this way? And then I now understand why. That's sort of part of our proprietary piece. I won't dive into too deep,
Yeah.
um, but in essence, after talking to all the different pattern makers, I realized why they weren't doing it. But they said, "Oh yes, we wish we could do it this way, but we don't have computers to do the calculations." Ah,
Mm.
so if you can combine what's in basically a pattern maker's head with the right computer and algorithm, we can get the
Mhm.
results that we need. So that was sort of the next. I guess you could say I spent 8 months validating it
Mhm.
before I was able to really kind of dive in, just because it was a very difficult problem. And it's not like I learned everything I need to learn there. I
Yeah.
spent a lot more time learning. I think I was still delusional at the time about how long this was going to take and how hard this was. And this might sound weird, but delusion might be entrepreneur's best friend, because sometimes if I knew how hard it was going to be to build this, I maybe would have done it, but I don't know. Like I would have had to really think
Ignorance
about,
is bliss.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So sometimes that's entrepreneur's superpower is you don't necessarily know how hard it's going to be, and then you just jump in, and then well, hopefully you have the resilience and the belief to just not quit at that point.
Yeah.
And that's sort of
That's
what's kind of happened here.
and that's so much of what I love about hearing, I love about you, is you take all these concepts that, and theories and all this kind of, again, these gurus and these founder gurus, throw out there, is, you have to, like, that obsession that you have, and the delusion and the work that you have to put in, and this and that and the next thing. But the fact that you're saying you had to do 8 months of research, reading papers that dated back from, at the time, was it 22-year-old papers ish, 20-year-old papers from back in 2020.
I probably didn't
And
quite have to go back that far. I could have probably gone to like 2010, but I guess I was being extra careful.
you did.
Yeah,
And here we are, right? But anyway, but the fact is that you did it. You didn't know you didn't have to. But now at
yeah,
2020, hindsight, it's always 2020, right? You didn't know. I
yeah,
mean, you could have read something from 2001 that would have been the thing that, like,
yeah.
oh, you didn't know that at the time. But you had to be willing to do that. And the fact that you are is amazing. And I think more, and you're also, I mean, this is a different, I don't want to say, because there is some other companies that are doing some similar. They're not doing like the full VR like fitting room thing, but they do like the custom order kind of stuff, right? There is some others. You have some kind of competitors in that realm, anyways, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I
But
mean,
what you
so yeah, so we have like three different components that are together. At most, any of our competitors are working on two, and even there, you could count what we consider real competitors on two hands. So it's a fairly
yeah.
specialized market. Yeah.
Yeah, so the data to like you had to do all that research because there's not as much anyways current data, and even the data that's there, this is new still.
Yeah.
So
Oh
even the
yeah.
data that's out there, it's not necessarily it doesn't tell you much other than this is what's acceptable right now, but not necessarily what's optimal right now. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. And I mean, also, that's when you think about scientific papers, they all that they're trying to do is like prove it out conceptually, but it's not like it
Yeah.
actually works from
Yeah.
that. So you got to take
Exactly.
that and then actually make it work and
Right.
commercialize it. So, I mean, the biggest thing why I had to do that is that I didn't know much about the space and I needed to understand all that information to know what kind of people to hire and what kind of team to build.
Mhm.
So, like I said, I didn't understand all the math in any of those papers, but it gave me the right tools to help find the right
Mhm.
people to then join the team.
You said you had a hired. It was the most interesting role I've ever heard anybody hire for. Well, it was I think but judging by your smile,
Qua-
you know what I'm talking about.
Quant physics simulation.
Cloth physics simulation.
Yeah, yeah.
So you
So
had to hire
somebody,
like a go
I
ahead.
hired somebody whose master's thesis was in cloth physics simulation, and that's what we needed. That's how specialized some of the work that we're doing is. Yeah.
So specific. But you get to that point when you're trying to do what you're doing, like you need masters in their realm, right? You
Yeah,
can't
and
have a bunch of jack
PhDs.
of all
Yeah,
trades.
yeah.
Yeah, you literally.
We have I guess probably everyone or almost everyone in the company is either master or PhD.
Yeah, it's that's probably more rare these days to have a startup that has true masters. And is that because there's just because they are so specific, maybe the new and exciting opportunities for them aren't as abundant. So joining a team like yourself, like it seems much more, well, it is much more exciting.
That's literally what it is.
That makes
So
sense.
we haven't yet talked about the problem that we're trying to solve, but I think the only reason why I've been able to be able to get the people that I've been able to get so far is because they're really passionate about the problem.
Mm,
So at a high level, so there's the bigger problem they're trying to solve and the smaller problem. So the bigger problem is that the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world behind oil,
most
accounting for
polluting.
yes, accounting for 10% of all global emissions. But the worst part about this number is that most people don't realize is that close to 40% of everything that's manufactured that's apparel is not purchased. And out of that
40%.
40%. And out of that 40%, the majority of it does not even get donated. Like 84% of that, so what is that, around 30% or 32%, a little more than that actually, like ends up getting incinerated or destroyed. So we're not like it's not going, to some third world country where it's getting donated. That happens. That's the 16% of that 100%.
Mm,
So that's the insanity. So the bigger vision and mission of what we're trying to accomplish, eventually trying to get all the brands to switch over the next 10 to 20 years to switch over to custom fit manufacturing, is that then the brands will not produce things that people don't want. And if people
mm.
don't produce that people don't want, we're talking about eliminating 2 to 4% of all global emissions. And just to put that in perspective, the entire pollution worldwide of methane gas is 1.6%. So this can do more good than that. And yeah, and it's the lowest, in my opinion, it's a low hanging fruit. It's like we're literally
Yeah.
producing stuff people don't want. Why are we doing
Yeah,
that?
it's
So
like
yeah,
pure gluttony. It's crazy.
yes, yeah.
That's wild. Those numbers are crazy. That is so cool. So cool. I actually have somebody who he was on my partner's podcast he's a nonprofit. He runs a nonprofit and they partner with businesses like apparel brands and businesses where they any of their overhead they donate to them and then they resell them at like pennies on the dollar to underprivileged communities and that kind of stuff. So there are some of those out there, but not obviously enough because that's those numbers are bonkers, absolutely bonkers.
Well, it seems like that they just produce so much stuff. But like I
Yeah.
said, in about 16% of the overproduction goes to the exact use case that you talked about,
Mm.
but the other 84%. I mean, I know stories, well, not stories, like just what happens. So at a certain point where they can't deal with the clothing, they load up container loads. They ship it out to certain countries in Africa or certain countries in South America, and then
Mm.
the container load arrives and they sell the clothing by the kilo. It
I'll
doesn't
just
matter
buy.
what's in there. You buy by the kilo, and usually these things have tags on them. Like this is like
Mm.
brand new clothing. So that's how insane it is.
Yeah, that's you get somebody who just bought like I don't know $2 a kilo of clothes, and there's like a bunch of Aritzia stuff in there with the tags on it, like $200. I'm selling this stuff. That's you probably see a lot
Yeah,
of.
yeah. I mean, so with that's the reason that's the problem is like with the luxury brands is they're not trying to devalue their value, so the luxury brands are burning it rather than giving it
They would rather.
away.
They would rather. You're
No,
right. Yeah, they would probably rather burn it.
exactly. So, but if they just never had to overproduce in the first place, if they could only produce what is wanted, we wouldn't have to
Mhm.
go through all that. The customer would be happier because they get a custom fit garment. The brand will be happier because at the end of the day, actually, even though their cost of production is higher on custom fit,
Mhm.
because they're not overproducing, because they don't have to deal with the higher
Oh,
amount of returns, it actually ends up being closer to a wash, if not more profitable to do it this
yeah.
way. And there's a
Well,
good
over
feel good story. Yeah,
and over time, like that process will get more refined,
yeah,
and the cost of manufacturing will go down.
exactly. Yeah,
It's just somebody needs to do it. There's a few people need to do it
yeah.
first, and then they'll develop. I mean, that's how it always works. It seems expensive, or it is expensive as at first, like any other technology, and then as it becomes easier to produce and cheaper to produce, and there's just more, it becomes more and more kind of commoditized, then it gets cheaper, and we just have to. I'm glad you're leading the charge on that, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
glad
it's
you
not
are.
going to be it's going to be a long journey. I mean,
Yeah,
this is we know that that particular part of the vision is going to be the hardest sell, and we're going to have to first start by with smaller brands and prove out the business model, prove out the profitability, prove out the manufacturing process. But eventually, as we do, this is sort of the 20-year mission for the companies to try to get the majority of the fashion industry away from mass production and
yeah.
towards this more sustainable way of production.
Beautiful, my friend. That was my golf clap for you. It's very respectful. I'm very no. That's amazing. I love like the journey. Like you started a business because it's what you wrote in school, a business plan that you wrote in school that ended up going really well, and then you overlooked some regulations. You learned from it, and then you learned how to identify markets and profitability potentials and this type of stuff. And then you went into a less regulated, and then you kind of learned that like, okay, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm probably not going to make the right decisions or make the sacrifices and stick with it long enough. Blah blah blah. There's a million different lessons there, and then you kind of see like you really kind of found your own in the VR space. It's something you got really excited about, and then the amazing 3 store 3 hour light bulb or 3 store 3 light bulb event that kind of got you to where you are now and focusing on this. It's incredible. It's really really cool. Do you ever like look at, do you ever like, this is cool, like I'm doing some cool shit, and give yourself
Uh,
props?
yeah. Well, okay. So I was actually right before coming to this. I was at a networking event, and I haven't gone to those in a while. And sometimes when I meet new people that I haven't talked to you about, and I like talk about what we're building, and I see their eyes light up,
Yeah.
and that makes me feel like okay, I'm on the right track. Like this
Mhm.
matters. Like this needs this, and
Yeah.
especially in the entrepreneurial journey, you have some days that are pretty rough, and it's those moments that kind of keep you going, being like, okay, like this needs to this like I'm not doing this for me. I got to do it for
Mhm.
everyone else because this needs to exist, and that extra
Yeah.
fuel is something that's I guess
Yeah.
definitely keeps me going. Yeah,
Well, and I think that's a good lesson too, to those that are in the grind. I've been there multiple times myself, where just like just something where like you explain it, and it comes out of your mouth like it's so fluently, and like you conceptualize the problem that you're solving and the service that you're providing or product you're providing, and somebody's like, that's awesome, and like sometimes it's all you need. Like that'll hold you over for another week.
yeah, literally.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I absolutely
Yeah.
love it, my friend. I love what you're doing. So where, if somebody wanted to support you, if somebody wanted to get more information on what you're doing, whether it's, I don't know where we can talk about this offline, kind of where you're at and other aspects of business, but where could people find you?
Yeah, so the company's URL is thefittingroom.tech. You can now use the first, what we call phase of our product, which is the outdoor skating and massage recommendation with 3 brands that we're live with. And we're really in the process of onboarding brands aggressively right now. So hopefully a lot more here before the end of the year, depending on kind of when you're watching this. And then we can look forward to the second product being live very very soon as well. And if you can find me on LinkedIn, Kirill Moisyeyev, Kirill space Moisyeyev, Moisyeyev.
Now that
So
you like spell it out, it kind of it sounds how it's spelled. Actually, that was my own problem. So
yeah,
is it the fitting room or just fittingroom.tech?
we're keeping the on purpose. So at least for now, I know like it was the Facebook, then Facebook. I don't want to drop this the ever. I want it to be the only fitting room that you have to use for the rest of your life.
I love that. No, I love that. Hey, keep it in, my friend. But this is Kirill's an amazing example of why we do what we do at Summit Chasers, to support businesses like him, and to highlight businesses and founders and individuals in general, like him. So I'm so thankful that you got to come on, gave me a bit of a break from talking all the time on these founder focuses. But I absolutely love what you're doing. I love the lessons that people will be able to take away from this, and I can't wait to see your continued success and what it's going to look like in the future.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on this podcast. And yeah, I hope something that I said resonated with somebody and helps you out in your personal journey as well.
I don't know if you saw, but I was taking notes, so I'm sure it definitely helped with a lot of people. But everybody, X really showed up for us today. We had a little over 80 people on X, but I can't see their comments because StreamYard's crazy, but that's okay. But again, thank you everybody for being here. And if you're watching this afterwards, thank you as well. Drop a comment, go support the fitting room, go support Kirill. And until next time, everybody, keep chasing your next summit.
Sure, guys.